Welcome to Paranoid Wargaming. It's a pleasure to have you here. For today's video, we're going to compare the supremacy abilities for each faction in Parabellum's Conquest using a completely original method, a tier list. Obviously, you know how this works. High tier good, low tier bad, and we'll talk about each of them and why I think they should be rated that way. Now, I am just wanting to say that these are obviously my personal opinions. If you don't agree, that is perfectly fine. Hell, comment about it and tell me why I'm completely wrong and X and Y are actually amazing in all of your games.
So as you can see, I have all the characters from the current factions laid out right here, and we're just going to get into it. So, for the first one, the Imperial Officer has Redeploy. For the turn the Supremacy ability was used, you may rearrange all command cards in your command stack. Personally, it's D tier. It's bad. It's already been buffed, and it's still bad. The problem is that, quite frankly, you generally do not need to build your deck, roll to see who goes first, and then rebuild the whole thing. The most you'll do here is maybe switch out one or two cards. Now, maybe your strategies involve something like that, but personally, especially with the Turn the Tide draw event, you generally don't need to do that. But that's just my take. Then is the Noble Lord, who has 4 Honor. The Warlord's current regiment and the Warlord himself gain the Fury draw event and can reroll failed impact hits. This supremacy is always considered to be active. It's C tier. It's a 10-point draw event. That is your Warlord ability, whereas some of these upcoming regiments, it's definitely worth more than 10 points. The most relevant thing here is probably that your cavalry that are attached to him effectively get flurry on their impact hits, which is really nice, actually, especially if you can bring him in with Crimson Tower by just attaching him. That could be nasty. However, all the Supremacy does is it gives you a fairly cheap draw event, and it just makes a small Death Star unit, and that's pretty mediocre. Next one is the Priory Commander, who has the first Blessing. Every regiment in the Priory Commander's warband gain Blessed for this turn. Now, Blessed lets you once per turn reroll all failed hits or reroll all failed defense rolls for one action. So if you get punched and then shot, you only got to pick, or if you swing, you got punched and then you got shot, you could reroll all your failed hits, you could reroll all your failed defenses when you got shot or when you got punched. But you get one. Now, I've struggled where to put this, but I feel fairly confident it's B tier. It is okay. And Blessed is a strong ability, this is true, but it's only for the character's warband, which means that it's only up to 4 regiments. And especially when Priory Commanders can take Order of the Ashen Dawn, who already have Blessed, this does nothing to them. So you need to take regiments that don't have Blessed, and it's only 4 regiments. Effectively, what I see this doing in most games is 4 regiments gain Flurry until end of turn. And that's not huge. It's a very mediocre... Well, the ability itself is not mediocre. However, the fact that it is such a small portion of your army really isn't that good. And then finally, for the Theist Priest, we have Incite Fervor. All your regiments immediately lose their broken status and gain Devout for the turn, except for Priory Commanders and their warbands, because they're atheists, lore-wise. In addition, for the remainder of this turn, your regiments cannot become broken. I like this ability. I like this ability a lot. I can't put it in A tier, though. If Devout was better than it is, it would probably go in A tier. I would say this is like high B tier. This is B plus territory. broken isn't that bad right now in 1.03. However, immediately removing it is not a bad effect. Preventing broken for the turn prevents you from being broken and shattered, which is a very solid effect. And probably the sneakiest thing here is it lets you run your priest and your mages up to the enemy, and if the enemy challenges them, you get to say no, and you don't take any penalty because you cannot become broken, which is a huge deal. Devout doesn't really do much in my experience. Currently, the buffing spells that Devout would affect are all too expensive, and they only affect his own unit. And if he is in a unit, they probably either already have Devout because your militia can get it and your Sicarii can get it. But yeah. And now we're on to the Spires. And starting off the Spires, we have the Biomancer, who has Provoke Instability. So for the remainder of the turn, all friendly infantry stands have +1 attack and gain the Decay 3 draw event. All friendly cavalry and brute stands have +2 attacks and gain Decay 4. All friendly monster stands have +4 attacks and gain the Decay 6 draw event. So, my first problem here is, one, this is an army-wide buff and it's an army-wide kill your own dudes ability, which is a little concerning. Secondly, your stands get these +1s, not your models, not those regiments. So where it says all friendly infantry stands have +1 attack and gain Decay 3, if your stand has 4 attacks normally, you now have 5. For brutes, monsters, and cavalry, this isn't as big a deal because you only have 1 model per stand, so it's effectively the same. But this is not very good for infantry. But I'm going to put it in low B tier. And the reason I put it in low B tier is because +2 attacks on all your brutes is really good, especially when you're playing Spire. Now, you're going to kill a lot of your own guys doing this. Generally, the reason you're doing this is because you are going to kill a large portion of the enemy army. This is the coup de grace ability. This ends the fight. It's over. Personally, I don't like it that much because it, again, kills off most of your infantry. And the way I've played Spires is I generally trend towards the elves, so the Vanguard clones, Vanguard infiltrators, and they don't care much for this because a unit of Vanguards, or a stand of Vanguards, has 8 attacks normally. With this, I go up to 9 attacks, woo, and then I kill a third of the unit. It doesn't seem worth it in the way I play them, but in a monster mash strategy, might just be good enough. Next up, oh yeah, the High Clone Executor. You know him, you love him. I'm just putting him where he goes. S tier. The High Clone Executor's ability, or HCE as I'm going to call him because it is much easier to say, is Coordinated Assault. If you have played against Spire, you have seen this ability. And it says, this turn, you resolve the top 3 cards of your command stack as one go. Draw 3 cards, resolving the actions for each unit in turn before your opponent draws their next command card. Note, these activation cards cannot draw other activation cards from your command stack. If the rules include such wording, ignore the rule. So, yeah, every other army wishes they had a Coordinated Assault. It is so, so good. It is something your opponents have to plan around, and it gives you such a strong initiative. It's very good. However, there are some downsides, the biggest one being you basically lose access to biomancies with this, because all your biomancies require you to draw the next card and look at it, and you can't do that during this. So if you had a plan to go first and enhance a Abomination or Vanguards, it's not going to work. And that does mean your opponent, after getting the crap kicked out of him by these 3 regiments, does have a chance to go, okay, I should probably hit these vanguards before they get unstable enhancement and charge me and mess my day up even more. But other than that, it's a staple. Most Spire lists are going to run this. It's just so good. Next up, the Lineage Highborn, who has Legacies of the Ark. If the Lineage Highborn is your warlord, which it's a supremacy ability, I don't know why it states that, it may select any number of mutations instead of only one normally allowed. It pays full points for these extra choices. Yeah, it's D tier. It's bad. It can be funny, is the biggest advantage. But the problem with this ability is quite simple. It's redundant. They introduced the Elder Mastery for the Lineage Highborn only, and it gives her 2 more mutations, so you're getting 3 on her. And there really isn't a great reason to run more than 3 mutations on her. She's perfectly happy with 3, and over 3, you're investing maybe 250 points, 350 points into a single character, and this is Conquest. So your character can be as tough as they want. I'm going to kill a regiment, which you didn't put points into because you were busy throwing every mutation in the book onto your Highborn. It's just, it needs something else. It is probably the worst passive supremacy in the game. Spoilers. If it gave you some bonus to Avatara, or it let you take a different kind of Avatara as a mainstay, like Centaurs or Leonins, that could be really interesting. But as it stands, it's just mediocre. Well, not even mediocre. It's just bad, quite frankly. And then next up, the Ferromancer, who has suppressed survival instincts. All your regiments gain +2 resolve for the remainder of this turn. Very simple, very basic. And this is what I would call mediocre. +2 resolve. So you're tougher against melee and spells. And I guess if you want to do withdrawals and stuff, whoopee. The problem with this is, 1, it's not very good. 2, you're playing Spire. Spire have some of the best resolve characters in the game. Like, the Ferromancer, your, under Spire, lower class, loser with a stick, has freaking resolve 3, which is as high as the best 100 Kingdoms guys. You don't need this. Most of your important regiments are going to be resolve 3, 4, 5, 6 in the case of your Avatara with the Lineage. So the +2 resolve never does anything. And this is one I would definitely like to see have something else tagged onto it, because as of right now, you're never going to take this. If you're playing Spire, you're either going to go for the good ability or you're going to go for the funny ability. But never this. Now on to the Dwegum. We've got the Ardent Karaweg. It's the dwarf priest. You know what he does. But his supremacy is Righteous Annihilation, which says your regiments add 2 to their charge distance until the end of the turn. Pretty simple. It's an army-wide buff. It's an army-wide speed buff, effectively. So this one's a tough one. I want to put him in an A tier or B tier, but I think it's B tier because it isn't a +2 to march. If it was a +2 to march, it would be A tier, maybe even low S tier. +2 to charge distance is a big deal. That means most of your regiments are getting a minimum 8-inch charge. It means your faster regiments are getting, like your Inferno Automata, are getting a minimum 11-inch charge. So it's nothing to be sneezed at, but it is a fairly simple ability. I charge a little further. But I think it's good. I think it's solid. That's why it's B tier. It's just solid. It's okay. However, next up, we have the Tempered Sorcerer. You know him, you love him. You've seen this one, I know that. Who has Elemental Puissance. I think that's how you say it. I don't know. Dweghom names are hard. Which says, your sorcerer gains 1 additional action per activation. Note that this allows him to perform 2 identical actions per activation. So that's right, you're using him to seek new escort twice, right? You're using him to duel twice, right? Well, I've seen that. It's quite funny. But no, you're using this to cast 2 spells. And you should be, because it's good. Now, they have FAQ'd this so that it's not the same spell twice, which is probably why it's... I want to put it in S tier, but I think it's A. We don't have any A tiers yet, but it's A tier. This is definitely A tier, with the nerf, because throwing out 2 spells a turn is good. Now, Dweghom's spells right now are in a weird place. I think they should be a little stronger, but, you know, Flame Wall, Roots of Stone is what you're going to see right now. Every turn, and that's a strong character, and it's a strong ability. Passive Supremacy abilities, as long as you're not the Noble Lord and not the Highborn, are very strong. And his is just good. Next up, the Tempered Steel Shaper. See, I can say that one. Who has Living Metal, because he is a T-1000. And his ability is instantly heal each of your regiments for 4 wounds. So usually, bring a stand back is what effectively it says. Unless you're running the big dudes, the Stone Forged. But it's good. It's a good ability. It's the only healing your army has. And the biggest downside is that it's at the very start of the turn. And the way morale works, stands brought back do not count for morale purposes. So if you had 2 stands and you use this and you brought back the 3rd, the game only sees that you have 2 stands until the end of this turn. So at the start of the turn, it would count that there's 2 regiments there, or 2 stands there in that regiment. Then the Supremacy activates. They get a 3rd stand, but that is not counted until the start of the next turn. So that means even though there's 3 stands there now, if I kill 1 stand, it breaks. If I kill 2 stands, it shatters. So while it does give you some healing, that is very good in the Dweghom army because your army is already quite tough, and it gives you potentially a lot of healing. Like, as you play bigger point level games, this can go up to, oh yeah, I heal my army 28 wounds, which is insane. I think I'm talking myself into making it A tier. Yeah, I'm going to make it A tier. It's strong. If you're not, you will have reason to consider this over the Tempered Sorcerer. It is close, but you have reason. However, with the next one, you probably won't. The Holdrach, I don't know. I don't speak Dwarf. Even if they're fire dwarfs like the Dweghom are, I don't speak it. Who has the Enduring Mountain, which is a cool name for an ability. However, what the ability says is your regiments ignore 1 point of cleave or 1 point of armor piercing from enemy attacks for the turn the Supremacy ability was activated. So, armor piercing 1 becomes armor piercing 0, armor piercing 2 becomes armor piercing 1, etc. This does nothing to brutal impacts, so your 100 Kingdoms Cav charges, don't care. Centaur Avatara, won't care. But I think it's bad. I think that's a tough one. It's C tier or D tier. I know that. It's just not a very good ability. Like, you know what, I'll put it in C tier because maybe you might take this. It's not going to do much for you. But I feel like there's going to be somebody in the comments telling me their glorious story about how they completely destroyed some 100 Kingdoms players Household Guard who now are Cleave 0. And I, as a 100 Kingdoms player, would hate that, yes, because Roots of Stone plus this effectively means plus 3 armor to a regiment, and that's rough. So, you know what, I'm going to stick him in C tier. He's notably worse than everyone else, but you would use it about as often as you'd use the Ferromancer. And it's kind of the same issue as the Ferromancer, except at least he protects you from ranged. He doesn't protect you from smite. So Bow Chosen, don't care, and will kill your stunties. But it's not bad, I suppose. Well, it's not as bad as I was imagining in my head. And last, but certainly not least, we're on to the Nords with their 5 Supremacy abilities, because Nords got characters. Oh yeah. And we're starting off with a very good character, the Blooded, who has Call the Hunt. Every regiment in this character's warband gains the Flank special rule. This is their passive ability. It applies even while he's not on the board, and it's really good. That's an S tier. That is the way I've played it. One, the Blooded is what makes me want to play Nords. Nords have a lot of flank. Flank is fun because setting your whole army up turn 2, which is what I do with the Blooded, is fun. Basically, you kit out his warband with Bow Chosen, Trolls, Ogre, doesn't matter. And then you set most of your army up turn 2 or turn 1. Or heck, you could run the meme list and just run a Blooded with a warband of 4 Ogre that are like 6 stands apiece. And then you just set down your Legion of Ogre turn 2. It's really good. Now, it is just your warband, because if it was your army, it would be beyond S tier. It would be nerf please tier. But even at just the warband level, this is an ability that I think makes sense for it to be just your warband, both for fluff purposes and for on the tabletop, because Flank is a really good ability. And the Blooded has so many available regiments that he absolutely makes use of it. So next up, not as good, the Jarl. Surprise attack. On your next turn, keyword next turn, both you and your opponent suffer a +2 penalty to your reinforcement rolls, i.e. a 3+ roll becomes a 5+, etc. Should a reinforcement roll go beyond a 6+, then the regiment cannot arrive from reinforcements this turn. I like this ability a lot, but I don't like its restrictions. So, unless you're a Blooded, and that's about it actually, unless you're a Blooded, and I guess the Queen, but she's not out yet. Shh, it's a little secret there. Your Supremacy ability cannot be activated unless you're on the battlefield. And the Jarls wants to be activated very early, because not only do you activate it, because you roll for what comes on, then you do the Supremacy ability. So you have to bring him on, activate the Supremacy the turn after you bring him on, and then wait till the turn after that for anything to be affected. So there is really basically only 1 or 2 ways you use this. You bring him on turn 1 with a light unit, you activate it turn 2, and then turn 3, you deny anybody from getting heavies, and you make mediums come in on a 5+, and lights automatically come in, and this does not do anything to regiments that auto come in. Unless they have flank, because if you prevent them from coming out at all, then flank doesn't work. So I guess I could see you wanting to do like I have a bunch of mediums with flank, like Ulfhindar, who are awesome, by the way. A bunch of Ulfhindar flanking turn 2, and then you deny your opponents any heavies turn 3. But that's it. That's the only way you can use this ability. It's C tier. I want to like it more. I want it to be stronger. All I want it to say is you may use this ability while while the Jarl's not on the table. Or, I don't know, maybe give just your opponent the +2, or give them +2, give you a +1. Since it's your surprise attack, I don't really know why it delays both of you. But Next up, it's the hard to pronounce man. That's right. The Conungir. The Conungir. Yeah. Who has not even anything close to a model out right now. So we're going with a white text with the name. He has Warcry, a very simple ability. All your regiments gain terrifying until the end of the turn. The B tier. Because it's an army-wide ability that gives terrifying. And terrifying is good. -1 to leadership strong. Forcing your enemies to roll to rally is alright. There's still so many ways to get around your units being forced to rally that it's not that good, but it's really that -1 to resolve that you care about. I can attest that, especially when you have some Ulfhindar or anything else. Giving them terrifying means they're going to shred. Even Spire with their stupid Resolve 4 shenanigans. Their Resolve 4 getting bumped down to 3 is a big deal. That's a 25% decrease. It's quite good and underrated. But what is not underrated is the next one, the Shaman, who has Call the Storm. All enemy stands count clear shots as obstructed shots until the end of the turn, which is something that happens a lot of the time in Conquest anyways, because are there trees? Well, you're obscured. Are you over half your range? You're obscured. There's a lot of ways to become obscured in Conquest. Can you not see the whole regiment? You're obscured. It's D tier. It's so bad. What this usually says is 1, maybe 2 regiments that did have clear shots don't have clear shots for this turn. But that's it. You have the shots of like 2 regiments. If it did something for already obstructed stands, like Call Fog, but as a supremacy ability, that could be interesting. If it said enemy stands that have obstructed shots may not fire this turn, that would be a really good ability, and that wouldn't even be a huge change. But as it stands, it's bad. It's not very good. And then finally, the Volva, the Fulfa, I mean, depending on how Germanic you want to say it, who has the gift of the Einherjar. I know how to say that word. All your regiments gain +2 to their evasion statistic until the end of the turn. So, +2 to invul saves, army-wide, because evasion is effectively an invul save. The only thing in the game that ignores it is things that do auto wounds, so 1 Spire spell, Decay, so a Spire thing, and Quicksilver Strikes, or not the Quicksilver Strikes, the ability that everyone puts on their Mimetic Assassins. But it's irrelevant. It's really good. Because if your army is all evasion 0, you're still Nords, so 2 defense unmodifiable army-wide is good. But it's +2, it's not 2. So if your regiments already have evasion, it's now, for example, you can take a +1 to evasion ability on the Volva, which means that it goes from 0 to 3 evasion. Ulfhindar have evasion 2 base, so they go up to evasion 4 base, and if they're with the Volva, their evasion, with who has that ability, they're evasion 5 now. So if you're running an army of Ulfhindar, which I feel like people will be doing when they arrive, you give them all storm shields army-wide for a turn. That is so good. In an army that's known for how fragile it is, that is such a good ability. I can't make it S tier because it is a defensive ability, and Conquest is a game that favors attack. So, it's close, though. It's very close. And I like it a lot. It is super duper strong. And, yeah, I think when they arrive, probably this year, I assume, you'll see people running this quite often. It does actually contend with the Blooded if you're wanting a different strategy than I put my army down turn 2. But overall, like, looking at everything, I gotta say, right now, this is a pretty good looking list, like, balance-wise. You've got 2 at the top, 3 at the bottom. You know, the most are middle ground. That seems pretty fair to me. There's 1 guy per faction in the middle. I'm more of a buffing than nerfing kind of guy, so I would love to see these guys in D tier pushed up. I would love to see these guys in C tier pushed up, quite honestly. Like, I don't know how, other than what I suggested for the Jarl. Just adding something new to the Pharaohmancer. Heck, even if the Noble Lord, that was a Warband wide ability, I would say Fury wide. Yeah, Warband wide Fury is probably B tier. The Ardent, giving some kind of bonus in addition. But yeah, overall it's fairly reasonable looking. It's not like everything's S tier or everything's D tier. It's fairly reasonable, and unless you're 100 Kingdoms, your army has something that is A or S tier, something that's quite good. I do hope that the 100 Kingdoms get some kind of bonus, some kind of better enhancement to these. I really don't think that the Priory or the Thief's Priest needs it. Maybe tack on something to the Priory in addition to Blessed. Maybe if Devout becomes more relevant, the Thief's Priest will go up. But yeah, the Imperial Officer at this point, he just needs a total redone ability. It's quite bad. It's just unnecessary. I know what they're trying to do. If he had something that involved reserve roles, that would be really good. Initially, when he came out, the wording was different. It basically said that you took a card from his warband and you put it on top of the deck. And the way people interpreted this was, you could take a heavy regiment and put it on top of the deck turn 2, which was cool. It meant you could cheat in Steel Legion or Gilded Legion on turn 2, which was neat. However, they clarified that it had to be one that you had already rolled for and was on the battlefield, and then they realized that get one of 4 regiments and put it on top of your deck was pretty mediocre, so they buffed it into this, which is still bad. But overall, pretty good. You're probably not going to see most of these supremacies down here, and you're probably going to see a lot of these 5 right here. Now, this is it for all the available factions. However, the Wadroon will be coming out here soon. It's March right now, so it's like a month or so before their rules drop officially, and that'll be exciting. So that's it for this video. Be sure to check in and subscribe if you're interested in any future content. If you're new to Conquest, I have linked a few channels in the description that have excellent battle reports. And if you really enjoyed this video, leave a like, because the algorithm demands it. Drop a comment about what you'd enjoy seeing me do next on the wonderful wargame that is Conquest: Last Argument of Kings. Bye.